I was born January 26th, 1931.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
My mom may have had assistance from a midwife. Most of the babies at that time were, and it's possible that a doctor in Greenfield by the name of Dr. Bulger delivered me. I don't think that was ever explained to me, but he was always our family doctor when I was small. And he may have been able to make it to Wrights. See, we lived probably 10 miles. Wrights was tiny town, and it was about 10 miles to Greenfield where a doctor was located.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dad was married, met my mother when he was in the Army. Mm-hmm. And he got 2 for 1. Her mother came with my mom back to Wrights and lived with us for the remaining time in her life, which was many, many years. The old house was heated mostly with wood, but a little bit of coal. Coal was expensive, but to bank the fire at night we used coal. The heating stove in the living room, you could just get so many people around it. It got awfully cold in the house, and she'd always, my dad had grazed heck. He says all she'll do is move closer to it. She never throws a chunk of wood in it.
That's a funny memory. Oh.
And I think he was right. I don't ever remember her doing anything except scooching her chair closer. I can remember when I'd walk in the milk barn, and either my dad or my older brothers would take you had to milk the cows by hand. They'd take the cow's tit and aim the milk at me. They'd squeeze it and it'd get in my hair. And I never did tell anybody about it, but when it came time I didn't pay much attention to it. When it came time to wash my hair, it was stuck together. And she just raised heck about them squirting milk in my hair. I couldn't get a comb through it until she washed it. She got the job of washing it more than my mom did, I think. Mom never did growl about it. I guess she expected it.
Oh, that's funny.
Lived in the country, as I said, and I got pretty good at making cakes. And, well, I could make cookies and candy also, but cakes, I think, was my specialty. And the neighbor women would order cakes from me, made a little bit of spending money. And my only allowance, the only allowance I had, was 1 nickel a week on Saturday night. So I needed the spending money. That made a good cook out of me. The better cook I was, the more money I could make. She had a great personality. Never met a stranger. Always happy. She had a hard life, but you would have never known it. She was a great mother. Very good. He ran a tiny little grocery store in the tiny little town of Wrights. Mm-hmm. Sold everything from hammers and nails to groceries. Gathering place for all the old, not only the old men, but the young men too, around the stove to talk things over. And we were there until I was 5 years old. I don't have a lot of memory of that, and then we moved to the farm. But of course, my memory of the store carries on because we went every evening after supper to engage in that conversation around the stove. See, it was open all day and in the evenings also.
Okay.
And most of my evenings for about 5 or 6 years was in that grocery store. Dad always had to drive in after the cows were milked and the whole bit to keep gabbing with all of his friends. And Mom would usually sit in the car for that 2 or 3 hours because the women didn't gather like that. Job to gather what eggs our chickens laid every day. And I'd sneak a few of them out and sell them myself. And that bought me a little bit of extra candy. The nickel a week didn't go very far, even in those times. And of course, Mom and Dad knew I was sneaking a few out. I didn't sneak very many, but anyway, that was just, I suppose they considered that part of my pay for the help.
Yeah.
I'm not sure how many years I went to Wrights. Like I said, I was only 5 when we moved to the farm, but I was able to ride to school in Wrights with the milkman, the guy that came around to the farms and picked up milk. He'd give me a ride in the morning, then in the evening, afternoon, I had to walk home. Mm-hmm. I went there through the 6th grade. And then the guy in the milk truck, he quit hauling milk. I don't know why, I forgot what we did with our milk then, but then the other school was in the other direction, and it was about 2 miles away, but the mailman was going that way. Mm-hmm. So I was able to ride in the morning with him and then walk home in the evening. It was a tiny little school, 1 room. Wrights had a big room and a little room, grades 1 through 4 in the little room, and then the big room was 5 through 8. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I did always manage to have a ride, either with the milkman or the mailman, all 8 years in grade school. And I was pretty lucky because it was awful cold that time in the morning. It was cold walking home. I walked home every evening from both of them. But in the morning it was even colder. No, wasn't any playing. Wasn't much playing really, because I had certain jobs that I had to do. One of my jobs was carrying kindling, chopping kindling with a little hatchet, little old stuff to start the fire with. I had calves that I had to feed and water. And sometimes I had to help with the pigs too. It was always there was always work to do. Yeah. Even for little kids. Yeah. Yeah. They had a Baptist and a Methodist church. Okay. We were Catholic, outcasts. Let's see. They called us those Catholic kids. Yeah, Catholics were, it was a very strict, mostly Baptist, but a few Methodists in town, and they had their own church. See, the little town only had about 200 people. And we had electricity when I was there. When we moved to the farm, no electricity. I got a Saturday night nickel for an allowance. But we were better off probably than most. Most was even poorer than us, and we were awfully poor. There was not very much during those years. I don't think for anybody. If there was, I don't know who they were. Yeah. The Depression baby. Yeah. Yep. But had lots of company. Everybody else was just as poor as us. Radio. Well, we didn't. The first battery radio was in that store in Wrights where everybody would gather to listen to the ball games in the summertime. I don't remember our first radio on the farm. I don't remember it. I sure remember when we got electricity, but we had to have, I think we had a battery radio ahead of the electricity. The electricity was the biggest event of my life, I'd have to say. It really, you can't imagine living without it, in fact. All of the things that we use it for. Probably between 1938 and 40, it would have been before World War II. So it would have been somewhere in those years, and at that time I would have been probably about 8 years old. So I went a few years without electricity. Okay.